Good afternoon, and on behalf of the Elephant Protection Initiative Foundation, I extend a very warm welcome to everyone who's joined us for today's high-level event on elephants, biodiversity and climate change. My name is John Scanlon. I'm the CEO of the EPI Foundation, and we have a wonderful program planned for you today. But firstly, a reminder that today's event is being broadcast in English, French and Portuguese. And to hear us, you must select your preferred language from the interpretation icon at the bottom of the page, as you will see from the slide that is on screen right now. I hope you've managed to find it, and of course you're free to switch between languages at any time. This is the fourth high-level online event the EPI Foundation has held in the past year. And we've heard from First Ladies, former Presidents and Prime Ministers, and a wonderful range of African government ministers and senior officials, including from Cameroon, Chad, Gabon, Kenya, Liberia, and Nigeria. Today, we are delighted to be joined by VIP speakers from Angola, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Malawi. And we are deeply grateful to them for agreeing to participate in today's event, which is being moderated from Nairobi by one of Africa's leading conservationists, Dr. Winnie Kiru, who is our Director of Government Relations. We are confronting biodiversity, climate and land degradation crises, all of which are intertwined. And before I hand over to Winnie, who will introduce our guest and moderate the question and answer session, we want to share a short and powerful film with you. It's about the Samburu people of northern Kenya and how they, elephants and other wildlife are coping at a time of severe drought in a truly spectacular landscape. And we're very grateful for the support we've received from the Milgis Trust, who supplied the fabulous pictures you're about to see. After the film, we will go straight to our colleague Winnie to moderate today's discussion. Thank you again for joining us.
In northern Kenya, a land of beauty, towering mountains covered in lush forests, surrounded by vast and arid landscapes. It's a delicate ecosystem. The mountains and their forests catch the water and release it slowly to the surrounding drylands. This land belongs to Samburu pastoralists. They live alongside an abundance of wildlife. The Milgis Trust works across a 6,000 square kilometer area, helping the Samburu to conserve this landscape and improve their lives. But the fragile balance is now under threat. Temperatures are rising, droughts are getting longer and more severe. This year's was devastating. The Samburu have always dug wells in the dry riverbeds, or lagas. But it's not just they and their livestock which are thirsty. So is the wildlife. Tensions are rising.
This is where wildlife, livestock, human beings come for water. And as a result, there is a very high competition for the resource. People dig wells for their livestock and for their families to get water. And during the night, in the evenings, wild animals, elephants, wild dogs, hyenas, guinea fowls come and drink from the same wells, and in the process they break the wells, they cover the wells again, and as a result people are a bit bitter with wildlife, and they chase elephants whenever they see them around here, they chase baboons whenever they see them around here, and this escalates human-wildlife conflict.
Ngata mbari na mara kupuna ko tunyi karampari wa ko duwe mone musi ana ko toke keno ana musi le kidoto ile tu mina ka poke do na da nuwa ha kita msa yo la so sabu ko pi wole do kala la ngama
Desperate for water, some elephants fall into the wells and discover they can't find a way out. Freeing them from these wells is difficult and dangerous for people, and traumatic for the animal. Often, it is the babies who fall in. And not all the trapped elephants can be rescued. This one died. So with the help of the Milgis Trust, the Samburu are rebuilding wells so they can be used by both livestock and elephants.
The other wells are just a hole going down. So we are trying to make this with one side flat so they can walk in and walk out. And as a result, it reduces conflict with human beings.
There are also other pressures on the land. Erosion caused by overgrazing by livestock and erratic rain. The precious soil washed away. The gullies, not just in the arid lowlands, but even up on the fertile hills, are like open sores. The forests have always been a rich source of food and other materials for the Samburu, and the elders know how to use these resources and how to conserve them. But can these traditions survive? The conservation challenges are immense, with more people and livestock, commercial poaching, and increasing pollution. But there are also hopeful signs. Elephants are now more common in this landscape. A few years ago, they were never seen by day. Samburu culture is alive and resilient. The Milgis Trust works with the Samburu to improve health and water supplies, as well as reduce conflict with wildlife. Building resilience will be essential in years to come for biodiversity, and so the people of this area can prosper, even in the age of climate change.
Greetings, everyone. This is Dr. Winnie Cairo. I'm speaking to you from Kenya. I'm actually in a beautiful part of this country in Amboseli, and I'm very grateful for those of you that have managed to join us this afternoon. I hope that you have enjoyed that short film that sets the stage for our discussion this afternoon. We are going to hear from the Kenyan government and other governments from East and Southern Africa as we deal with these issues of climate change, elephants. Now, but first, let me remind you that we will have 20 minutes of questions after our VIP speakers, and I will encourage you to submit your written questions. Submit your questions to the Q&A box. Would love to hear from all over Africa. So if you're a Portuguese speaker, you're a French speaker, you can write in any of those languages. I'm sure you heard from our introduction that you need to choose the language that you listen to this webinar on. If you go to the bottom of your screen, the icon on interpretation, please choose the language that you prefer to listen to this webinar in. And if you are following the event on social media, the hashtags we are using are hashtag coexistence and hashtag African voices. They will also be shared on the chat. We're also recording today's event, so it will be available at a later date. Now, it is my enormous pleasure to welcome and introduce the Honorable Najib Balala, the Cabinet Secretary for Tourism and Wildlife from my country, Kenya, who joins us live from Nairobi. Shikamoo Waziri, karibu. Honorable Balala. Honorable Balala, please let me know if you are having a challenge so that we can know how to proceed. kindly write in the chat if there's a challenge with your audio. Honorable Balala. As we try and sort that out, sometimes we do have a few challenges. We will just go on to Angola because we have the Secretary of State for the Environment in Angola, Her Excellency Paula Curlo, also joining us for this chat. So as we figure out how to sort out that small issue with Honorable Balala's audio, let's listen to Honorable Paula Curlo. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Thank you for inviting me for this speech today. And Honorable dear guests and distinguished colleagues, I'm very happy to share with these few words with you, even though it's a video message. But today is my birthday and I'm celebrating it on a day that we talk about elephants, which are one of the iconic species that we strongly need to protect and preserve for the future. Not only for ourselves, but for the future and the good for the wildlife as an iconic species for the future generations to come. I also would like to address that the impact on climate change, the biodiversity loss, and also many other conventions, we need to work together as one strong voice to the world. Even though the EPI platform is a very strong one, but we can maybe make it courage to strengthen the delivering of all this. None but the less that we should also address is that what we are facing in the north of Kenya that we are launching the movie today. We are also struggling the same in the southeastern areas parts of Angola, where more than around about 100,000 people has been affected due to climate change, from grass, from cereals to food perspectives. So there is not an easy issue to deal with. But I believe if we stick together, if we stay strong, then we can achieve. Once we have been working with an international consultancy, Tamar Rom, which you know very well, that we also discussed the principle to have an environmental fund to tackle all these issues. What about that? Maybe I deliver that to you so that through this message we can further discuss and we can further develop programs specifically, not forgetting, of course, that elephants is our main and iconic species on this program, and also we need to continue fighting the issue of elephants in the men conflict. I would like to call that all women, strong people, youth, new generation, future generation, we should stay together to tackle all these issues that affect not only Africa, but the world in one voice, and I thank you.
Happy birthday, Your Excellency. Thank you very much for your speech. Indeed, we need to be inclusive as we tackle these issues. And now I'm going to welcome Ethiopia. I'm going to welcome Kumara, who is joining us from Ethiopia. He is the Director General of the Ethiopia Wildlife Conservation Authority. We are still expecting Honorable Balala to join us, but as we sort out the issues with that audio, let us listen to Kumara from Ethiopia. Welcome.
All right, thank you, Dr. Winnie. Good morning, good afternoon, honorables, distinguished colleagues and friends. Really gives me a great pleasure to talk to you today about the elephants, biodiversity and the climate change, very interlinked. And we have really the very critical concern, and we share the problem which we saw in Samburu in Kenya, in Ethiopia as well, because we are neighboring countries, and the entire region, the Horn of Africa, so vulnerable to the impact of climate change. And especially for the last 3 consecutive years, we have experienced failure of rainfall, which has led into, a great pressure from drought, and then people are suffering and wildlife also suffering. In Ethiopia, we have a large population, currently estimated about more than 110 million. We can imagine that, and then we have also a chronic shortage of fertile land, and then the demand for natural resource is increasing over time. So we can imagine how really dealing with elephant and dealing with biodiversity in the presence of climate change is so complex and then so difficult. So the integrity and then the protected areas, all these coming under pressure from human activities, and the poverty and the insecurity all exacerbates the problem. So for instance, we can see the situation in one of our protected area, which is called the Babile Elephant Sanctuary, which is located in eastern Ethiopia. And we have our one elephant population in this region, in which we recently estimate about 250 elephants left. Of course, this is a small number, and this elephant population very restrict to few areas, and this particular protected area very much, disturbed, and with more than 35,000 people using this area for various natural resource use, cultivation, settlement, and then so on. And then we have also livestock pressure in this particular site. Annually, over 150,000 livestock visit this area. So we can imagine that how really the problem is so complex. And then conserving elephants and biodiversity is really a big concern. So under this situation, we can imagine how the impact of climate change even more complicates the conservation of elephants. But on other aspect, we have a success story in one of our national park, which is called Chabara Churchura National Park. It's a recently established park where we have relatively a good number of elephant population, and the law enforcement, we have strong law enforcement in this area. The problem with the Chabara Churchura National Park, apart from the increasing number of elephant population, on the other side, human-elephant conflict is also increasing and then becoming an issue. Recently, I visited this site and then met with the local community, local authority, and then we have discussed that the situation is really becoming a great concern. Of course, we have been doing an assessment in order to come up with short and medium long-term solutions in this area, and then we are expecting the outcome of this assessment come out shortly. And so in general, as a success story in terms of elephant conservation, we have been doing a lot of actions, and we have developed in the National Elephant Action Plan through the support of Elephant Protection Initiative. We have been trying to implement this National Action Plan, and then the number of elephant killing, of course, declining, except for this year, we have faced again increasing killing cases of elephant. which we thought mainly related to the drought, because in some areas, especially in Omo, it was reported that elephant killing happened related to the drought, just to obtain meat from this the elephant. So we have challenges everywhere with biodiversity conservation, and especially elephant, because elephant requires a huge area, and then resource, and then competition with the community inevitably increases. So it's very important to increase our integration with stakeholders, both at national and then regional level. In this regard, we really very much appreciate the effort which is put forward by EPI to coordinate all of us and then bring efforts here and there, and then to share our experience in terms of success story. So really, on behalf of the Ethiopian government, I would like to extend my appreciation to the Elephant Protection Initiative for hosting us. And thank you, Winnie.
Thank you so much, Kumara, speaking to us from Addis Ababa. And now I can see my minister, Honorable Najib Balala, is ready with his address. Shikamo Waziri. Karibu. Karibu.
Asante sana. Thank you very much. Well, Winnie, thank you very much. And John Scanlon, thank you very much for inviting me here. EPA, we are the founders, and we are working very closely with yourselves. Sorry, we had technical problems initially to start this meeting. I couldn't hear a word that you, Winnie, were talking. So I don't know how to start, but I know the agenda. The agenda is very clear. It's about elephant biodiversity and climate change. That is key. We in Kenya have been very successful, first of all, in increasing the numbers of elephants in the country. 2 years ago, we had 34,000 elephants. Last year, we did a census, and now we have over 36,000 elephants in the country. Elephants are good, and we conserve them very well, but also they are engineers of destruction, both environmental destruction, but also human destruction. And yes, we managed to tame poaching in the country. Remember, in 2020, we had 0 poached rhinos in the country and only 9 poached elephants in the country. From January till today, we only had 8 elephants being poached in the country. So the numbers look nice in terms of control and tame. And I want to congratulate both KWS, Conservancies, and NRT for a great job into monitoring all these illegal wildlife activities that sometimes take place in our countries. But there's also a major problem now coming up in the world, and Kenya is not left out, and particularly the issue of climate change. I can see that in the last 6 months, from January to July to June, to end of June, we had lost almost 149 elephants in Tsavo alone because of drought. That's a major, major problem that we are facing. We're already putting in place almost 13 water ponds in Tsavo area alone just to save the situation. But we need to address the holistic issue of climate change, not only in Tsavo, but globally. So issues of climate change, we should all take seriously. Otherwise, we are going to lose our biodiversity and our wildlife that we have protected for a long time. That's one key thing that I think we need to address this issue. The other key issue, which I find it very important, is we should not lose the goodwill of communities and people in conservation. At the moment, there's a major conflict. Human-wildlife conflict is a major problem. We in Kenya, we have tried our best. In the last 5 years since I started this portfolio, we have paid $30 million in terms of compensation. And another almost $40 million is backlog to pay compensation. If we don't get support on compensation, because government cannot do it alone. Government must get NGOs, must get philanthropists, must get people to support in this compensation fund. Unfortunately, this has not become a priority to most of our partners. We need priority to address the issue of human-wildlife conflict, particularly on the compensation fund. We try to look at the model of the insurance, but still is not working, because even the insurance premiums needs to be paid by somebody, and that cannot be government anymore. Government cannot take responsibility fully. And at this matter, all animals in the country, if it happens a conflict with national parks, government can take responsibility. But if it is outside national park, then I think conservancies and partners like the NGO should come and take responsibility and complement the efforts of government. Otherwise, we are going to lose goodwill of communities because they don't get compensation. Recently in Kajiado, we had a crisis there. And that crisis is going to escalate if we don't address the issue, because there's climate change, there's lack of food, and the elephants now are venturing into private agricultural land. And remember, there is competition now of human settlement and agriculture towards this. So I appeal to EPI to put human-wildlife conflict compensation funding to be a priority. That's one key issue I want this meeting today to resolve on, because otherwise, goodwill, to tame poaching has already been tamed, because we have the right policies, we have addressed the right judiciary, we have taken the right action, there's collaboration well, we have closed the market internationally, but human-wildlife conflict, we are going to get communities be the enemies of wildlife. Currently, as I'm talking, I have figures. Over 50 elephants were killed because of human-wildlife conflict. And this number is increasing daily. So we are going to have more elephants killed because of human-wildlife conflict, rather than elephants being killed because of poaching. So the money of poaching must be now diverted to actually have coexistence between humans and wildlife. And it's important, EPI should help us to establish a fund for compensation when it comes to issues like conflict. Remember in 2020, when there was no tourism business for conservancies, the government stepped in to support salaries of conservancy rangers by almost $1 billion Kenya shillings, which is $10 million. And that managed to safeguard the heritage that we had. So I appeal again, once again, compensation is a critical issue. But at this juncture, I want to bring in Dr. Hiro, please allow me. I've read a disturbing report called the Auckland Report, which is very disturbing. It portrays very bad and misrepresentation of the situation on the ground. This group decided to come and do some research without consulting government and my office. I'm not aware. I just read a report, which is very damaging, which also demoralizes the efforts that all of us do it. It is not directly on government, but actually it is on people who are committed. And in this point, I want to say that NRT is doing a great job in conservation. Conservancies are doing a great job in conservation. 75% of wildlife are outside the national parks. When they're outside the national parks, somebody needs to help in. And these good people are trying to help in. They might not be perfect. There are flaws, but it is all of us to work together to correct these flaws. And I think because there's lack of a comprehensive legal framework of how do we manage community land outside national park in terms of wildlife conservation, that's why the flaws are there. But I have called a meeting with donors, I have called a meeting with NRT, and NRT has owned up on flaws that are ready to be corrected. It is us now in government working with partners and making sure that all these flaws are being corrected. But it is not fair to give a condemnation of good work, good initiative, and good intention for wildlife conservation. Government cannot be the only authority in the land to protect wildlife, which most of it is outside the national parks. 75% are outside the national park. Donors are supporting NRT. Donors are supporting initiative from private communities to be able to empower them to stand on their own. But also I want to appeal to donors. You must work through government so that there is an impact to make sure there is transparency, there is accountability, but also there is effectiveness of those resources. And when challenges happen like this, and this Auckland report that is totally not acceptable, then we will be able to defend it and stand and verify that this is not right, and what is right, together we can identify what is right. So Winnie, I want to appreciate this discussion. EPA is a good partner, but we need now to address what is current. Current is two major. Climate change, we must address it collectively. And then the issue of human and wildlife conflict. The goodwill of communities will be eroded if we don't address the human wildlife compensation funds, which government already has spent $30 million. And there's another backlog of $40 million. If we can together clear the $40 million in the next 12 months, I can assure you, we can be able to reverse some of these conflicts that we see. Communities are now poaching animals, not for ivory, but for defense of their livelihood. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Balala. I can see already the Q&As are on fire because you have brought up many interesting issues, and we look forward to having an even more greater discussion in the Q&A. And now I will welcome our last speaker before we go to the Q&A session. This is Brighton Kuchendwa, a good friend of mine who is the director of the Department of National Parks and Wildlife in Malawi. Mulibwaji. How are you, Brighton?
Thank you so much, Winnie. I'm good, and you? Welcome, good afternoon, good morning, depending wherever you may be. Honorable Minister Balala from Kenya, also Honorable Minister from Angola. Let me also recognize the CEO for EPI Foundation, John Scanlon, and also my good colleague, Kumala, Director General, Ethiopian Wildlife, and of course, Winnie, but also everyone else who has joined from across Africa and beyond. Good ladies and gentlemen, I must say it is an honor for me to talk about elephant conservation in Malawi, the biodiversity and climate change. Honorable ministers, ladies and gentlemen, Malawi used to have over 4,000 elephants. However, by early 2000, the elephant population was so decimated because of poaching and illegal wildlife trade, so much so that some protected areas became devoid. I am, however, pleased to inform the House today that our national parks and wildlife reserves are now thriving, and the elephant populations are increasing. As I've already said, these are protected areas that were in great difficulty. And for that, Malawi has really shown how it is possible to reverse the situation. You may have heard, ladies and gentlemen, that from this month, July, working with our partners, International Fund for Animal Welfare, IFO, and African Parks, we have started already moving elephants. By the end of it all, we want to move 250 elephants from Liwonde National Park, that is in the southern part of Malawi, to Kasungu National Park in the central part of Malawi. Kasungu National Park is one of the parks that really suffered heavily from poaching, which had a population of elephants around 2,000, but by early 2000, only 50 elephants were remaining. Indeed, this translocation follows the translocation of 2016 and 2017, where we moved in the period of 2 years, 500 thereabout elephants from Liwonde National Park and Majete Wildlife Reserve. At the same time, we have improved our legislation and have taken other measures to crack down on the illicit wildlife trade. That has included successful prosecution of wildlife cases. We have turned our situation around, but we still face enormous challenges. One of the reasons we are moving elephants from Liwonde is because of growing conflict, as it has already been said, and also as shown in the film, growing conflicts with the surrounding human population. The elephant population in Liwonde National Park has exceeded the carrying capacity. The consequences have been frequent breakouts, killing people, destroying property, but also making the environment of the park vulnerable, as clearly stated by Honorable Balala to say elephants, they are also drivers of destruction. You may wish to know, ladies and gentlemen, that Malawi is a densely populated country. Each protected area is surrounded by a heavy population, human population, and that has made our protected areas or our elephant populations to be fragmented. They're just seas of protected areas among the human population. These challenges are, of course, exacerbated by climate change, as it has already been alluded to. Here in Malawi, our weather is becoming unpredictable. For example, in 2014, 2015, we suffered serious floods. This was followed by serious drought, 2015, 2016. And just this year, we also suffered heavy floods, particularly the southern part of the country, which affected a number of protected areas. These were a result of cyclones Gombe and Anna. The consequences have been hunger among the communities, among the population surrounding protected areas, and this continuously exerts pressure on the wildlife resources in our protected areas. It is important to stress, though, that elephant conservation and conservation generally is part of the solution. If we can protect our elephants, we will be protecting a wide range of biodiversity. And we will also be preserving the forests and wetlands, which help to mitigate climate change. In other words, we must stop seeing these problems in isolation. The challenges of wildlife conservation are intricately connected to each other, to environmental challenges. Therefore, we need the international community to understand this and to help African countries such as Malawi bear the cost of conservation. I listened very carefully, Honorable Balala, emphasizing the need for support, for example, to go into compensation. For instance, with major international conferences coming up this year on climate change and biodiversity, this is a critical time for people to heed this message. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, honorable ministers, I thank EPI for bringing us together today. It is a wonderful platform for conservation and governments from across Africa to learn from our respective experiences and to speak with a more powerful voice to the rest of the world. I look forward to the questions and answer session. Thank you so much for listening. I thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We are now going into the question and answer session, and I can see many of you have posted questions in the Q&A. You are welcome to ask your questions. You can ask in Portuguese or French as well, if those are the languages that you are comfortable in. And of course, the majority of the questions are directed to Cabinet Secretary Honorable Balala. There is Wanjala, who is concerned about conflict in Taita Taveta, and specifically in an area called Kireti. He says they're experiencing harsh drought, water is scarce for both man and animals, and the elephants have been invading homes and destroying water tanks, uprooting taps. He says they have made several reports to KWS, and they just wonder what measures are being put in place to compensate them for some of this damage. He also wants to know, other than the government, what other parties are involved in mitigating human-elephant conflict, and what are they doing to ensure that both parties coexist in peace? Honorable Balala, I have other questions for you, but maybe you want to just start with that one.
Okay, thank you very much, Winnie. I read the question from Taita Taveta. Taita Taveta is among the hotspots for elephant conflict because, again, first is a big area. The whole Tsavo National Park is over 2 million hectares, yeah, and we have 14,000 elephants in the Tsavo conservation area. So it is a problem. And again, as I said, the biggest issue now is climate change. If there is no food in the park, they will go outside. And again, we have to look at the model. What type of model do we want of conservation? Because some areas we need to be fenced. Unfortunately, some areas we need to protect the public. The public must become a priority for protection. And protection, for me, when there's a conflict, we should be efficient and prompt in issues of compensation. Government has done their best in the last 5 years. 3 billion Kenya shillings is a lot of money. And we have not seen any support from outside government or partners who will come to support it. That's why I appeal EPI to be the conduit to mobilize resources from partners and donors so that we can be able to compensate. There is a backlog, as I said, of another $40 million to be able to be cleared up to 2022. So again, my worry is the worry from the gentleman from Taita Taveta. We need to build goodwill with communities by seeing a prompt response in conflicts. Again, when there is incidents like death or like damage, we need to be prompt in compensation. And that is what the agenda we are pursuing today.
Thank you. Honorable Minister, maybe while we are still talking about compensation, I will just follow up with a question from another attendee that says, while they agree entirely that all local people must be helped to avoid loss of lives and livelihoods, but wonders if compensation helps long term. He says that it is not used as a mitigation measure, and the understanding is that communities as well as government and NGOs need to take responsibility for avoiding human-wildlife conflict, and alludes that he suggests that compensation allows people to avoid taking responsibility for crop protection, for example, or for better management of their livestock. So perhaps you could address yourself to the issue of compensation and the responsibility of communities. The figures you mentioned are indeed extremely high, and these issues come up all the time. When we compensate, do we require any form of responsibility from the communities that have suffered loss and damage?
Well, first of all, the model we have is a free range model where animals are allowed to go freely. Yeah, we don't have a model like in other jurisdictions where animals are locked or fenced out, either in conservancies or sanctuaries or national parks. Our national parks are open. Until we lock all the animals inside the sanctuaries, then yes, we can ask the community to take responsibility. As much as the model is free range, and the unfortunate part is there's pressure of agriculture and pressure of human settlement that now putting pressure of animals to the corridors to be blocked. I think the priority is to open up corridors so that we have free flow. But even when we open corridors, still animals will divert to good food, which is maize or other humanly grown foods. The other issue is that the issue of carrying capacity. How many elephants are enough in our jurisdiction? That is a serious discussion. We don't want to talk about killing elephants, but how do we control this number is right and this number is wrong? Yeah, the advantage of Amboseli National Park, for example, they have almost 2,000 elephants in Amboseli National Park. There's enough food, there's enough wetland there. That's why the conflict is limited probably. But in areas like Savo, in areas like Kajiado, in areas like Taita Taveta, there is a challenge. There is there's actually climate change impact. At the same time, there's communities living besides these protected areas. And this is where the challenge will be. So for me, I appeal, we must all take responsibility, but also we should be sensitive. The minute we lose goodwill of the people will become the enemies of wildlife. And that is what we don't want.
Thank you very much. Brighton, I am sure you have something that you can say about those two issues, like how successful have been your mitigation methods in Malawi? Are you using compensation as one of the ways to alleviate the suffering of people that are affected by human-wildlife conflict? What are some of your successful mitigation methods in Malawi?
Well, for the case of Malawi, that's what we are struggling with. There are always calls for compensation, but we have not tried compensation for fear that it may not be attainable. Largely what we are doing is promoting coexistence between wildlife and the communities by putting up barriers that not necessarily meant to bar people from getting into the protected areas, but rather barring the elephants and the other dangerous animals getting into communities, like construction of perimeter fences. I think we have perimeter fences in almost all of our protected areas. I think that's the major mitigation that we are doing among the communities. Probably,
Winnie, I can come in here briefly. Yeah. Yes. Recently, I visited Kruger National Park. Yes. Kruger National Park paid almost $300,000 in terms of compensation, 30 million shillings only. Small amount of money. Yeah. Why? Because the entire Kruger National Park is fenced. So the little just pockets where wildlife go out, that's why their budget of compensation is very small. So if national parks and animals are fenced properly, then there'll be very little issues of talking about compensation funds and conflict probably. But again, you want communities to take responsibility. They must get an incentive or benefit from this wildlife. Again, photographic tourism has survived for a long time, but now there's pressure of agriculture and human settlement, and again, the impact of climate change. How do we remodel of this wildlife economy that benefits communities so they take responsibility of protecting animals? I'm not talking about hunting. I'm not talking about just killing animals. I'm talking about, I think communities need to see the value of wildlife, having them in their property so they don't kill them instead. They know this is part of their benefit or part of their resources as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kumara, maybe you want to switch on your camera. There are a number of questions coming through for Ethiopia. People are interested in knowing some of the places where you've had success stories. There is a question from Ian Redmond to do with what you might be doing in terms of looking at carbon. There has been, forest elephants particularly have been shown to enhance their habitat's ability to sequester carbon and store carbon. And savanna elephants increase the level of soil carbon and other nutrients. Can you just tell us whether you have maybe even thought about exploring payment for ecosystem services? We have had a conversation about this in a previous webinar, Kumara. I don't know whether you've at any point thought about exploring payment for ecosystem services as one of the ways of raising conservation financing in Ethiopia.
Thank you, Dr. Winnie. Could you see me? Because I can't see.
Yes, I can see you.
On the screen.
I can see you.
Right.
I can see you and hear you clearly. Maybe Brighton, you can also switch on your camera so that people know you're there and we can ask you questions.
Because I'm attending another session in parallel.
Yes.
So, yeah, with regard to compensation in Ethiopia, I think also we don't have that scheme, but we try to help the affected communities through indirect kind of support, because of course compared to Kenya, so far we don't have per se such complex and then serious conflict, because even our elephant number is still very low. According to the information we have, the number of elephants in total in Ethiopia doesn't exceed even 2,000. So Ethiopia is a very big country, but human population which is increasing in our case, and then bringing maybe a serious problem in the future as human settlement and then agriculture, all these things expanding to the protected area. So it's inevitable in the near future that elephants human conflict became also a concern and a serious problem in Ethiopia. And then that's why I just mentioned the case of the Chebara Chuchura National Park, where we are seeing gradually the number of elephant population increasing. And then it's almost an age effect, and the boundary of the park immediately you find also settlement and cultivation. So when elephants even travels an inch outside the park, they get a crop or even people. So that's a problem. And then in terms of Babile, it's a human settlement almost inside the range of the elephant. Then that's why the conflict is very serious and then complex there. But in Ethiopia, we are much emphasizing. We are not fencing. Also, we are not, believing in fencing, because we also allow free-ranging animals. But as mentioned by Honorable, we have also the issue of blocking of the corridors because of expansion in terms of development, and then huge investment in terms of land, and then those ones. So we are more emphasizing on awareness raising rather, and then putting in place indirect kind of compensation mechanism, maybe through ecotourism, and then those things. So we just we use a local radio and then media just to raise awareness on how the vulnerable people could be able to safeguard their property, and then just we teach them, and we produce toolkits and then dispatch those toolkits to the community to mitigate and then manage the expected conflict. So I very much support the appeal made by Honorable to just encourage partners and then also the donors just to prioritize also supporting human wildlife conflict issue. So far, even in Ethiopia, we don't have partners and even donors who emphasizing on intervening this conflict issues. They mostly focus on other conservation priorities. So I think this is a very, very important appeal, which we also support. In terms of payment for ecosystem service, we have drafted legislations and then submitted for approval to the Minister of Council. So once it's approved, I think we will exercise this payment for ecosystem service, especially related to the carbon sequestration. So I think that's all. But the issue of conflict, it is complex. I saw that EPI also prepared a position statement for CBD for this element to be prioritized and then considered in post-2020 biodiversity framework, so that it's getting a priority and then attention at the international level, and then we all should voice for this conflict issue to be lifted up and prioritized. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kumara. And indeed, you bring up an important issue. The open-ended working group of the CBD just was convened in Nairobi. And it's important to see just how many wildlife issues are coming up in the post-2020 biodiversity framework. And I feel like our wildlife ministries need to get a lot more engaged, because this is where the issues of human-elephant conflict are being articulated even more than any other convention. So the EPI opened up this discussion. We actually suggested some language for the post-2020 biodiversity framework. And it's really important that wildlife ministries, wildlife departments get very involved in these discussions, because the text is going to chart the way that the future of financing, for instance, is going to happen. I have seen Honorable Her Excellency Paula Coelho from Angola talking to us on the chat, and I just want to check whether she's in a position to address any questions. I know that she was having a challenge joining us for various reasons, but I have seen some engagement on the chat. Your Excellency, are you in a position to answer some questions or give us a perspective from Southern Africa? We've listened to Brighton. It would be nice to know what's going on in Angola. So if you can kindly let me know in the chat whether you're able to switch on your video and give us some perspectives from Angola. Meanwhile, Brighton, before, I have lots of questions for Honorable Balala, but I want to just address Brighton at the moment. Perhaps you can give us an idea of how Malawi is also, facing this issue of alternatives in terms of looking at conservation financing. These issues of payment for ecosystem services are just some of the ways that we could address these issues. And I don't know if Malawi has addressed themselves to alternative forms of financing. Perhaps you could just tell us what Malawi is doing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Winnie. For the case of Malawi, yes, we are seriously thinking of alternative financing, and one of which is carbon trade. It's fairly new. It is being practiced in two of the protected areas that we have. It is indeed in partnership with the communities surrounding these protected areas. So what is happening is direct revenue sharing from the carbon trade. One way of compensating the communities for living close to protected areas, but also we are also thinking seriously in terms of tourism investment, but also engaging in community tourism as well, having community lodges within protected areas. So we are yet to develop when it comes to carbon trade, because we still have so many other protected areas. But being something new, we are in the learning process. So we plan to expand to other protected areas. I must say, we have just come up with an protected area investment strategy, and this has been adequately addressed when it comes to possible streams of revenue, and we will be embarking on carbon trade in many of our protected areas.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll just hear from Angola. Your Excellency, maybe you just if you want to address yourself to any of the issues that we've been talking about, or maybe just whether you think that the conversation on climate change is getting the attention that it requires, because for us in Africa, and especially in the wildlife sector, we are really heavily affected by climate change. Perhaps you could just discuss whether you feel that this issue is receiving the attention that it requires.
Thank you. I don't know if you are listening to me now.
I can hear you. I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Balala, dear colleague, and all of us. I just want to make some comments, especially regarding the Africa and SADC region, that we still have a lot to do. And I think the EPI, as I also said in the chat, I agree with the Honorable Balala that we should also look at the compensation tax fund to find alternatives for communities. As we give value to species, we need to see and find maybe new mathematics on how we can upgrade those issues. On the other hand, I would like also to address that our conservation areas, we need, as we are bounded to the climate change principles, especially Kyoto Protocol, for us to better defend our wildlife, we need to look what will be the adaptation or mitigation plan as a whole for our conservation areas as such to impact on tourism. Because the post-2020, as we further discuss, we also lose species. And here we focus mostly on elephants. We saw this huge impact and what was a win situation from the video and what was a loss situation, but still the ivory issues, and we need maybe to break down what are we talking about. Here in our meeting, we discuss broadly because we understand the concept, but what I see is the political commitment, understanding what are we facing now with the impacts that we are having, the raising of things as we go along, having marine conservation areas as well, in areas where, like in Angola, we also have the seaside where you also have mangroves and other type of species, as well as terrestrial elephants and savanna elephants and so on. Now, talking a little bit about Angola, and I see the challenges where racial species are broad, we're still facing challenges to populate the region. And I mean, Angola, especially on the south, is as a starting point. And I will continue maybe to call on an appeal that we can use the EPI. And I will take this opportunity that Kenya is one of the countries that I would like really to further discuss all those matters because of the experience we have, and also to engage some other countries in the region. So I just want to end up saying that communities, indeed, they huge play a role. They are very important and very keen on supporting, but they are also losing the habit of doing their own development traditionally. And this is also something that we need to address when we talk about this biodiversity and climate impact due because of the adaptation strategies. Thank you very much, and I submit.
Thank you. Now, we have had many requests to show the short film that we showed at the beginning. There's some beautiful images from Kenya. Thanks to the Milgis Trust, we were able to get this. And so I'm going to invite Honorable Balala to give us, to cover some of the questions that I have for him. And then after that, we will show that short film because I have so many requests to show it again. Honorable Balala, you have really a high-level political engagement or focus on these issues. Doesn't necessarily solve all of them, but Kenya has shown that the high-level engagement with issues, everything from illegal killing, illegal wildlife. You yourself have alluded to the fact that indeed poaching has reduced significantly. Perhaps you could just tell us what strategies you have to engage multi-stakeholders within government, high-level engagement around this issue of human-elephant conflict, because it seems to be a conversation where wildlife departments talk to themselves, and yet the solutions involve spatial planning, they involve issues around food security, they involve issues around climate. All these are dealt with different sectors in government. Perhaps, Honorable Balala, you can close by just pointing out you're very engaged in your ministry. What is it that this government's represented here can do to engage others so that we have a multi-sectoral approach to issues that we really can't solve alone as governments? You, as a minister who's very engaged in this issue, what are the strategies you have to bring in your colleagues so that we can be able to resolve this using high-level engagement? Thank you. You need to unmute your mic, sir.
I'm sorry, but thank you very much, Winnie, and it was very nice to hear Paula from Angola. Thank you very much. And I can tell you, Paula, anytime you want Kenya's support, Kenya's collaboration, you can count on us. We are not dealing on wildlife or biodiversity in isolation. We must do it together. It is one ecosystem. We are in one continent. Africa's ecosystem and biodiversity is one. So we need to address it collectively. That's why when we go to CITES, when we go to CBD, when we go to all these international forums, we have to have a pre-arranged meetings prior to this position. So your position is my position, because your problems are my problems. I think what is common here we have seen is human-wildlife conflict is key. That's why the issue of how do we raise funds to address human-wildlife conflict? How do you address of overpopulation of elephants? Because elephants are destruction. For example, now the worry is that, do we open up do we dispose our stockpiles to the market? That's another dangerous issue. If we dispose our stockpile to the market, we are actually giving an incentive to the market to grow. But how do we get compensated as nations and governments so that those proceeds of stockpiles can go back and be reinvested back in community development, in community protection? That is what we want. I think it's a high time now we work with our donors, and the donors establish special endowment funds where we can have an endowment fund for human-wildlife conflict. We have an endowment fund for sustainability of conservation in Africa. Because today when funds are available, we can conserve. Tomorrow when funds are not available, then all the good work we have done, it will be destroyed. And that's why I can see the challenge, what is happening in Angola as well. Yeah, and also other areas. So we need to come together and say we need strategy. Definitely we need to have an all government approach. Yeah, it's about food security, it's about infrastructure, how do we coordinate it well? In Kenya, we are now working closely to that. Because again, as you correctly said, Winnie, I take it as a high level government approach. And I have an open door policy myself. I want to listen to what communities' problems are. I engage donors twice a year, even more, to understand what are their challenges and how do we work together. Yeah, but also, if you have to have an impact, I can assure my donors and my friends, if donors want to be impactful with their resources and their funds, they better work very closely with government. You can put an institutional framework to have transparency and accountability. Government is ready to do transparency and accountability. But if you divert money from government and you think it will be done directly through communities or through NGOs, again, government have the capacity to do major projects with an impact. So I appeal to donors to be considerate of working very closely to government, because at the end of the day, the ultimate responsibility and accountability on human-wildlife conflict becomes government. Not associations, not NGOs, and not donors. So we need to work with donors. We need to establish endowment fund for human-wildlife conflict. We need to mitigate climate change. We need to actually manage our ecosystems better. Because for us, we are struggling to organize our Kenya Wildlife Service, our national parks better. We are spending $70 million to run Kenya Wildlife Service. And we are doing it. We don't want we have no issues in that. But if majority of wildlife are outside the park, then the problem is outside the parks, not inside the park. The problem is not with KWS. The problem is KWS stretched outside to the larger, again, 580,000 square kilometers to go and cover areas where it's beyond their jurisdiction. So those are the challenges we must address. And it is EPI who can coordinate that. We need to mobilize resources. I think everybody has their own strategies. Everybody knows what their problems are. Everybody knows what the solutions are. But the problem is resources to address these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Balala. On that very passionate note, we are going to sadly have to end this. We've got still lots of questions unanswered, and I want to assure you, those who have posted the questions, that we will go through each one of them and get you answers to these questions. And I want to also say that the EPI will continue to host these debates, these dialogues. You can see that with the range of people we have. Sadly, our member from
Okay, could I say something?
Yes, yes, please.
Really, thank you. This forum is very, very important. And of course, the issue of conflict is debatable. And, there are many scenarios. We are worrying for the increase of wildlife population, elephant population, as one of the driver for, increasing human wildlife conflict. And then on the other hand, we have also a concern of human population increasing and then even livestock population increasing, and how really could we balance, and who should be responsible, and just to maintain also the increasing number of human population, and then also the increasing number of livestock population, because the land is not elastic. We can't increase the size of the land. We are all computing on the same resource on one planet. So that's why it's a cross-cutting issue, and then it's very important to talk with various sectors, with various stakeholders, and then bring our common interest on the table. Yes, that's why very important to deal with agriculture sector, with health sector, with the investment sector, and then so that we can bring everlasting solution for all of us, because as mentioned, yes, we are also part of the ecosystem. Human being is also part of the ecosystem. We can't isolate human being. So we should be also worry about the increasing of human population, then increasing demography of livestock. And then we take responsibility not to just maintain the number of wildlife population, not to exceed the carrying capacity. And then also we should be able to communicate with other sectors in order to also, be much concerned, and then maintain the the changing demography in all aspects, so that we can bring everlasting solution for every one of us. Thank you, EPI, for really convening all of us, and then organizing this platform. I think it's a good deliberation, and then thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. And I'm Barnaby Phillips. I'm the EPI's Director of Communication from London. We were hoping not to end in London. We were hoping to end in beautiful Amboseli, but with Winnie, but she lost us there. So it falls to me to thank everybody, Najib Balala, Kumara in Addis, Brighton in Lilongwe, Paula, of course, in Angola. We're so pleased to have brought you together. And our intention was to end this special program the way we began it, with an absolutely beautiful film from northern Kenya, which I think touches on many of the issues that we've been talking about over the last hour and 15 minutes. And I could see that many of you joined the talk in the first 5 or 10 minutes. You might have missed the film. So let's play out the film now. We say our goodbyes, but of course the EPI Foundation will be in touch. We've recorded your questions and we will continue this conversation many, many times.
In northern Kenya, a land of beauty, towering mountains covered in lush forests, surrounded by vast and arid landscapes. It's a delicate ecosystem. The mountains and their forests catch the water and release it slowly to the surrounding drylands. This land belongs to Samburu pastoralists. They live alongside an abundance of wildlife. The Milgis Trust works across a 6,000 square kilometer area, helping the Samburu to conserve this landscape and improve their lives. But the fragile balance is now under threat. Temperatures are rising, droughts are getting longer and more severe. This year's was devastating. The Samburu have always dug wells in the dry riverbeds, or lagas. But it's not just they and their livestock which are thirsty. So is the wildlife. Tensions are rising.
This is where wildlife, livestock, human beings come for water. And as a result, there is a very high competition for the resource. People dig wells for their livestock and for their families to get water. And during the night, in the evenings, wild animals, elephants, wild dogs, hyenas, guinea fowls come and drink from the same wells, and in the process, they break the wells, they cover the wells again, and as a result, people are a bit bitter with wildlife, and they chase elephants whenever they see them around here, they chase baboons whenever they see them around here, and this escalates human-wildlife conflict.
Lalagi nyeto sosio leng, nyeto sosio sabu kupi. Mata mbari na mara kupu na kutunyi karampari. Wa ko duwe mone. Musi ana kotoke keno, ana musi legi doto. Leo tumi na ka poke. Do na da nuwa. Kita msa yo la sosio sabu kupi wole. Do kala dala ngamara. Lenji to yo msa idi samger taki yo la sosio.
Desperate for water, some elephants fall into the wells and discover they can't find a way out. Freeing them from these wells is difficult and dangerous for people, and traumatic for the animal. Often, it is the babies who fall in. And not all the trapped elephants can be rescued. This one died. So with the help of the Milgis Trust, the Samburu are rebuilding wells so they can be used by both livestock and elephants.
The other wells are just a hole going down. So we are trying to make this with one side flat so they can walk in and walk out. And as a result, it reduces conflict with human beings.
There are also other pressures on the land. Erosion caused by overgrazing by livestock and erratic rain. The precious soil washed away. The gullies, not just in the arid lowlands, but even up on the fertile hills, are like open sores. The forests have always been a rich source of food and other materials for the Samburu, and the elders know how to use these resources and how to conserve them. But can these traditions survive? The conservation challenges are immense, with more people and livestock, commercial poaching, and increasing pollution. But there are also hopeful signs. Elephants are now more common in this landscape. A few years ago, they were never seen by day. Samburu culture is alive and resilient. The Milgis Trust works with the Samburu to improve health and water supplies, as well as reduce conflict with wildlife. Building resilience will be essential in years to come for biodiversity, and so the people of this area can prosper, even in the age of climate change.